The silent observer. The morning air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and the soft hum of a radio playing an old jazz tune. Marcus Carter sat at his mahogany desk, the weight of exhaustion evident in his posture. His company, Urban Fusion, had grown into a household name, a restaurant chain celebrated for its diversity, quality food, and strong workplace values, or so he thought. For months now, the reports had been piling up. Complaints of mistreatment, racial bias, and unethical promotions had reached his desk like a slow-moving storm, each one carrying a heavier accusation than the last. At first, he thought they were anomalies, one or two bad apples. But the sheer volume, the consistency in the descriptions of favoritism, humiliation, and discrimination, it all painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. His fingers traced the edges of a folder labeled URGNT. He flipped it open and read the same damning words he had seen dozens of times before. I've worked here for 4 years. Every time there's an opening, I get passed over. They say I'm not a good fit, but a white new hire gets promoted after 3 months. Management treats us differently. White employees get praise. We get yelled at. I watched a dishwasher get mocked by the general manager for working too slow. He quit the next day. His stomach churned. This wasn't the company he had built. This wasn't the dream he had worked for. Then he saw the name that appeared in multiple reports. Stacy Walters, general manager, flagship location. She was one of his earliest hires, one of the managers he had personally trusted. If the allegations were true, it meant the discrimination was happening right under his nose. And that was something Marcus refused to accept. A sharp knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Lauren, his longtime assistant, stepped inside, holding a fresh cup of coffee. You look like you haven't slept, she noted. Marcus sighed. Maybe I haven't. I just don't get it, Lauren. I built Urban Fusion to be a place where everyone, no matter where they come from, no matter the color of their skin, has the same shot at success. But look at this. He gestured to the open folder. Lauren skimmed through a few pages, her expression growing grim. It's bad. It's worse than bad, Marcus muttered. It's betrayal. And the worst part, if I walk into that restaurant tomorrow as the CEO, none of them will show me the truth. They'll fix their postures, put on their best faces, and lie through their teeth. Lauren crossed her arms. So what are you going to do? Marcus exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath. I'm going undercover. Lauren blinked. You're what? I need to see it for myself. I need to feel what my employees feel when they walk into that restaurant. If I go in as Marcus Carter, billionaire CEO, they'll hide it all. But if I go in as Malcolm Jones, a new night cleaner, I'll see the truth. Lauren's expression was a mix of admiration and concern. This is risky, Marcus. What if someone recognizes you? I'll make sure they don't, he said, determination hardening in his voice. Besides, the real risk is letting this continue. If this is happening at my flagship location, who knows where else it's happening? It's time to clean house, starting from the ground up. The disguise of Malcolm Jones. The next evening, Marcus stood in front of his mirror, barely recognizing himself. Gone was the tailored suit, the polished shoes, the aura of a man who had built an empire. In their place stood a man dressed in worn khakis and an oversized navy blue work shirt. A simple baseball cap hid his familiar face, and thick-rimmed glasses completed the look. You look, Lauren hesitated, then smirked, like a guy who could use a better job. Perfect, Marcus muttered. She handed him a small ID badge with the name Malcolm Jones printed in cheap ink. This is your new identity. You start tonight at the flagship location as a night cleaner. Marcus nodded, slipping the badge into his pocket. He had spent years running a company from the top. Now, it was time to see what it felt like at the bottom. First night on the job. The flagship restaurant of Urban Fusion was just as busy as he remembered. The dinner rush had slowed, but the air was thick with the scent of grilled food and fryer grease. Employees darted around, carrying trays, clearing tables, shouting orders. It was the well-oiled chaos of a restaurant at closing time. Marcus adjusted his cap and walked through the employee entrance, gripping the strap of his backpack. "Yo, new guy," a voice called from behind the counter. Marcus turned to see a young, lanky employee with sandy blonde hair leaning against the register. His name tag read Dylan. "You're Malcolm, right?" Dylan asked, popping a piece of gum into his mouth. "That's me," Marcus said, keeping his voice even. "Cool. Stacy's in the back. She'll tell you what to do." Marcus thanked him and stepped into the kitchen. The moment he walked through the doors, he felt the shift in atmosphere. The kitchen was alive with movement, but there was a clear divide. The white employees, like Dylan, laughed and leaned against the counters, chatting about their weekend plans. Meanwhile, the black and immigrant workers were knee-deep in dishes, scrubbing, wiping, stacking. Then he saw her, Stacy Walters. She stood at the far end of the kitchen, barking orders with the confidence of a woman who expected absolute obedience. Marcus took a deep breath and approached. "You the new cleaner?" Stacy's eyes flickered over him, unimpressed. "Yes, Mom. Malcolm Jones." She didn't offer a handshake. Instead, she shoved a clipboard into his hands. "Bathrooms first. Make sure they're spotless. Then sweep and mop the dining area. Stay out of the kitchen unless you're cleaning something." "Understood," Marcus said. "Good." Stacy's voice was clipped, dismissive. She turned on her heel and walked away. Marcus exhaled slowly. That was the moment he knew. The complaints weren't exaggerated. They weren't misunderstandings. They were real, and he was about to see just how deep the rot had spread. A pattern of inequality. As the night wore on, Marcus worked silently, watching, listening. He saw Malik, a young black cashier, get berated by Stacy for a minor mistake, while Dylan scrolled on his phone, completely unbothered. He overheard Evelyn, a senior cook, venting to another employee. 5 years, and I've never been promoted. Meanwhile, Laura gets promoted after 2 months. 2 months. He noticed how the black and immigrant workers handled the hardest tasks, scrubbing, lifting, closing, while their white counterparts finished early and joked around. And Stacy? She barely acknowledged them, except when she was scolding them. By the end of the shift, Marcus's notebook was already half full with observations. The truth was uglier than he had imagined. And this was just the beginning. Beneath the surface, the restaurant doors swung shut behind Marcus as he stepped out into the cold night air. His shift as Malcolm Jones had ended, but the weight of everything he had witnessed clung to him like a second skin. The walk to his car was slow, deliberate. His mind raced, replaying the interactions he had observed. Malik, forced to endure public humiliation for a minor error. Evelyn, 5 years of loyalty and hard work, still overlooked. Dylan, careless and underqualified, yet treated with unearned favoritism. And then there was Stacy. Her presence alone set the tone for the restaurant. Her dismissive glances, her harsh words, the way she barely acknowledged the black and immigrant workers unless it was to reprimand them. Marcus clenched his jaw, gripping the cold metal of his car door handle. He had built this company to be a symbol of inclusion and opportunity. But standing inside that restaurant had felt like stepping into enemy territory. It wasn't just about one bad manager, it was systemic. And now he had to find a way to tear it down. An uncomfortable truth. The next morning, Marcus sat in his home office, surrounded by stacks of employee reports. A steaming mug of coffee sat untouched beside him as he flipped through his notebook from the night before. Page after page. Detailed notes on interactions, conversations, body language. Everything he had seen, everything he had felt. He had known workplace discrimination existed, but experiencing it firsthand had made it real in a way that reports and secondhand complaints never could. His phone buzzed. It was Lauren. "Marcus, you okay?" she asked. He hesitated. I'm fine. A pause. Lauren knew him too well. What did you see? He exhaled, rubbing his temples. Everything they wrote in the complaints. It's all happening, Lauren. Worse than I expected. She sighed. What's the plan? Stay undercover. I need more. If I move too soon, Stacy and the others will just cover their tracks. I need undeniable proof. Something they can't excuse or explain away. Lauren was silent for a moment. Then, with quiet determination, she said, Then we make sure you get it. The second shift. Deeper into the rot. That evening, Marcus returned to the restaurant, slipping once more into the disguise of Malcolm Jones. This time, he wasn't just observing. He was investigating. The moment he stepped through the employee entrance, the atmosphere was as tense as ever. The kitchen buzzed with activity, but the undercurrent of exhaustion was palpable. Hey, new guy, Jamal, a line cook, greeted him with a nod. You made it through your first shift. Thought maybe you'd quit. Marcus forced a half smile. Nah, I've had worse jobs. Jamal smirked. Doubt it. Before Marcus could respond, a voice rang out across the kitchen. Sharp, impatient. Malik, how many times do I have to tell you to double-check orders? You're costing us money. Marcus turned to see Stacy standing in front of Malik, her arms crossed tightly. The young cashier, barely in his 20s, looked down at his feet, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. I'm sorry, Stacy, it won't happen again, Malik muttered. It better not, she snapped, before storming off without another word. Across the kitchen, Dylan. The same Dylan who had been scrolling on his phone during the last shift. Accidentally dropped an entire tray of drinks, sending glasses shattering onto the tile floor. Marcus tensed, waiting for the outburst. But it never came. Instead, Stacy hurried over, her voice suddenly soft. Oh, don't worry about it, Dylan. Accidents happen. Just be more careful next time. Okay. Marcus's stomach twisted. The double standard was blatant. Malik got yelled at over a minor mistake. Dylan, on the other hand, got comfort. No wonder Malik and the others walked on eggshells. Marcus clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. This was exactly what he needed to see. He committed every detail to memory. The weight of silence. Later that night, after the last customers had left and the restaurant was empty except for staff, Marcus took a break in the storage room. He wasn't alone. Jamal sat at a small table, his hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee. His eyes, tired and distant, flicked up when Marcus entered. You're quiet, Jamal noted. Marcus shrugged, pulling out a chair across from him. Just trying to stay out of trouble. Jamal chuckled humorlessly. Smart. That's what most of us do. Marcus leaned forward. Why? Jamal's smirk faded. He glanced at the door, making sure they were alone. Because if you speak up, you get punished. Marcus stayed silent, waiting. Jamal sighed. Malik tried once. Couple months back, he mentioned in a staff meeting that promotions didn't seem fair. Next week, Stacy cut his hours in half. Said the schedule was tight. But guess who got extra shifts? He gestured toward the kitchen, where Dylan was lazily stacking dishes. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much. Why not report it? Marcus asked. Jamal scoffed. To who? Stacy's been here for years. The higher-ups trust her. She knows how to cover her tracks. Marcus forced himself to nod. And you? You've been here a while, right? 2 years, Jamal confirmed. And let me tell you, man, nothing changes. Marcus gripped his pen under the table, scribbling notes in his mind. It will. I promise you, it will. Cracks in the foundation. The night continued, and Marcus returned to his duties. He scrubbed, swept, and kept his ears open. As he wiped down tables near the bar, he overheard Evelyn venting to another employee. I've been here 5 years, Jamal. 5. And Stacy tells me I'm not leadership material. Evelyn scoffed. Meanwhile, Laura, 2 months in, gets promoted to supervisor. Jamal shook his head. It's the same everywhere. They say it's about experience, but it's not. It's about who they want to see in charge. Marcus kept his head down, pretending to scrub a stubborn stain. Evelyn crossed her arms. You know the worst part? Stacy knows I can do the job. She just doesn't want someone like me in charge. The word hung heavy in the air. Someone like me. Marcus wanted to intervene, to tell them things would change. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he had everything he needed. The breaking point. By the time Marcus finished his shift, he had seen enough. Stacy wasn't just a problem. She was the problem. She wasn't just enabling discrimination. She was actively creating an environment where black and immigrant employees were meant to feel lesser. Malik's humiliation, Evelyn's overlooked promotion, Jamal's resignation to the way things were. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was oppression, and Marcus had no intention of letting it continue. As he left the restaurant that night, stepping into the cold air once more, he glanced back at the glowing Urban Fusion sign. They had no idea who he was. They had no idea what was coming. A storm is brewing. The night sky stretched endlessly above Marcus Carter as he sat in his parked car, staring at the dull glow of the Urban Fusion restaurant sign. The words in his notebook haunted him, page after page filled with blatant discrimination, manipulation, and mistreatment. His chest tightened as he replayed the scenes in his mind. Malik, his voice barely above a whisper as he apologized for something minor, while Dylan got away with far worse. Evelyn, 5 years of hard work and dedication dismissed with a single phrase. You're not leadership material. Jamal resigned to a system that had already decided his worth before he even had a chance to prove himself. And then there was Stacy, a manager who didn't just ignore the problem. She was the problem. Marcus clenched his fists. His undercover investigation had already revealed enough to fire Stacy and expose the corruption within his company. But he knew that firing one person wouldn't fix a broken system. No. If he wanted to rebuild Urban Fusion, he needed a plan, one that ensured real change. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Lauren picked up on the second ring. Marcus, it's worse than I thought. How bad? Marcus ran a hand over his face. Bad enough that if I shut this location down tomorrow, I wouldn't feel guilty. So what's the move? I need to stay in longer, he said firmly. I have proof, but I need to see how far this rot spreads. If it's just Stacy and a few bad managers, I can handle it internally. But if it's deeper... Lauren's voice was quiet but sharp. Then we burn it all down and rebuild it the right way. Marcus nodded. Exactly. A calculated risk. 2 days later, Marcus returned for another shift at Urban Fusion's flagship location. By now, he had established himself as Malcolm Jones, the quiet, hard-working night cleaner. No one suspected a thing. That night, he wasn't just collecting information. He was pushing boundaries, testing limits, looking for the cracks in Stacy's foundation. And soon, he found them. A public humiliation. It started with a plate of spilled food. Malik was clearing a table when a customer accidentally knocked over his tray. The plates clattered to the floor, sauce and rice splattering across the carpet. The restaurant wasn't even that busy, but the sudden noise caught Stacy's attention. She stormed over, her heels clicking sharply against the tiles. What the hell was that, Malik? She snapped. Malik, already bending down to clean the mess, froze. His shoulders tensed, and Marcus could see the defeat in his posture before he even spoke. I'm sorry. It was an accident. An accident? Stacy scoffed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. That's all I hear from you. Excuses. You think we're running a charity here. Maybe if you actually paid attention, you wouldn't be screwing up all the time. The entire restaurant went silent. Malik didn't respond. He kept his head down, swallowing the humiliation like he had done so many times before. But Marcus wasn't about to let this one go. He turned toward Stacy and, keeping his voice deliberately even, asked, "Why are you yelling at him?" A few employees turned their heads at the question. Stacy blinked, momentarily thrown off by the fact that a cleaner, someone she had barely acknowledged, was questioning her. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dangerously low. Marcus didn't flinch. "I said, why are you yelling at him?" Stacy's eyes narrowed. "Because he keeps messing up." Marcus tilted his head. "Dylan dropped an entire tray of drinks the other night, didn't he?" Stacy's expression darkened. "That's different." Marcus took a slow step forward. "How?" The air in the restaurant shifted. Employees were watching now, listening. Stacy hesitated. Then she turned back to Malik. "Just clean it up," she muttered before storming off. Marcus burned that moment into his memory. The cracks were showing, and he wasn't done yet. An unforgivable betrayal. Later that night, Marcus took his break in the storage room. He found Evelyn and Jamal sitting at one of the tables, deep in conversation. They quieted when he entered. "You good?" Jamal asked, raising an eyebrow. Marcus sat down, exhaling. "No, that wasn't okay." Evelyn scoffed. "Nothing ever is." Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Then why do you stay?" Evelyn let out a hollow laugh. "Because I don't have a choice. I've got rent, bills, and 2 kids to feed." She met his gaze. "You think I wouldn't have left already if I could?" Jamal nodded. "It's not just about the pay. It's about being trapped. Stacy knows it too. That's why she doesn't care if she treats us like dirt. Because she thinks we have nowhere else to go." Marcus's chest tightened. Evelyn had earned a promotion years ago. Malik should never have been humiliated like that. And Jamal should never have felt hopeless. It was time to push harder. The final straw. A few nights later, Marcus was cleaning the kitchen when he overheard a conversation between Stacy and another manager, Eric. "I don't get why they're complaining," Eric muttered. "If they don't like it, they can leave." Stacy laughed. "Please, where else are they gonna go? Most of them don't have degrees, and the ones who do. You really think corporate America is gonna hire someone like Evelyn or Malik over a clean-cut white kid?" Marcus froze. The audacity, the cruelty, the sheer hatred laced in those words. He wanted to storm into that office and fire them on the spot. But no, not yet, because after tonight, there would be no escape for them. The beginning of the end. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He spent hours writing. By morning, his plan was set in motion. He wasn't just going to fire Stacy. He was going to expose her, to rebuild Urban Fusion from the inside out. And he was going to do it on his terms. As he stood in front of the mirror the next morning, staring at the reflection of Malcolm Jones, he smirked. Because after tonight, the game was over. For Stacy, for every corrupt manager in Urban Fusion, and for a system that had failed its employees for too long. The reckoning begins. A storm is brewing. Marcus Carter had spent weeks in the shadows of his own company, watching, listening, and documenting the systemic abuse that festered within Urban Fusion. He had seen enough. The favoritism, discrimination, and outright racism at the hands of Stacy Walters and her enablers were no longer rumors. They were facts. Facts Marcus had written down, recorded, and now planned to use against them. But firing Stacy wouldn't be enough. Marcus didn't just want to remove one bad manager. He wanted to burn out the infection at its roots and make sure it never returned. And tonight, that plan would begin. A dangerous game. By the time Marcus arrived at the restaurant for his shift, he had already made his decision. This would be his last night as Malcolm Jones. The moment he stepped through the employee entrance, the usual suffocating tension hit him. The division in the kitchen was palpable. The black and immigrant workers were overworked, ignored, and exhausted, while the favored white employees lounged around, chatting as though they weren't on the clock. Marcus clenched his fists. It's almost over. Just one more night. Stacy's sharp voice rang out across the kitchen. Malik, if you don't get those orders out faster, you can forget about having a shift tomorrow. Marcus exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay calm. Just a little longer. He had already put his real plan into motion. The turning point. 2 hours into his shift, Marcus did something he had never done before. He deliberately broke a rule. He entered Stacy's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she wasn't inside. He had only seconds to confirm what he suspected. He quickly scanned her desk and spotted a pile of employee schedules. His eyes narrowed. Exactly as he thought. Malik's hours, cut in half. Evelyn, never once given a leadership shift. Jamal, always working closing, never a primetime shift. Meanwhile, Dylan and Laura had full schedules, easy hours, and promotions lined up. Marcus took a picture of the documents with his phone. There it was, proof of deliberate discrimination. Now all he had to do was set the final trap. The setup. An hour before closing, Marcus found Evelyn, Jamal, and Malik sitting in the storage room. "You okay, Malcolm?" Evelyn asked, eyeing him suspiciously. "You look like you're planning something." Marcus smirked. "Maybe I am." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "Man, what are you up to?" Marcus hesitated for the briefest second. Then he said the words that would change everything. "I know how to get rid of Stacy." Malik blinked. "What?" Marcus leaned in. "Listen to me carefully. I've been collecting proof, not just of her favoritism, but of the outright discrimination she's been pulling. I have pictures of the schedules she manipulates, the pay discrepancies, the promotions she denies. But I need one final thing. Something so blatant she won't be able to lie her way out of it." Evelyn frowned. "And what's that?" Marcus exhaled. "She needs to say it out loud." Malik's jaw tensed. "You want her to admit it?" "Yes," Marcus said. "And I know exactly how to make her do it." Jamal scoffed. "Man, that woman doesn't say a damn thing unless she thinks she's safe." Marcus smirked. "Exactly. Which is why I'm going to make her feel really safe, right before she hangs herself with her own words." The trap. 30 minutes before closing, Marcus positioned himself outside Stacy's office, pretending to clean. He had his phone recording in his pocket. Inside, Stacy was speaking to Eric, another manager. "I swear, if Malik complains one more time, I'm done with him," Stacy was saying. "I don't care if he quits. Let's be honest, these types of people always act like they work hard, but they never actually step up." Marcus's heart pounded. Eric laughed. "Yeah, and then they pull the race card when they don't get a promotion." Stacy chuckled. "Exactly. Like Evelyn. Give me a break. That woman could work here another 10 years, and I still wouldn't put her in charge. People like her don't belong in leadership. They don't have the right mentality." Marcus's pulse roared in his ears. "Got you." The moment Stacy dismissed Eric and stepped out of her office, Marcus was already gone, phone in his pocket, recording secured. The fall of Stacy Walters. The next morning, Marcus Carter returned to Urban Fusion, not as Malcolm Jones, the night cleaner, but as Marcus Carter, the CEO. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, he strode into the flagship restaurant like a king reclaiming his throne. The moment he entered, all eyes turned toward him. Stacy froze mid-step, her face draining of color. "Mr. Carter," she stammered, immediately straightening her posture. I wasn't expecting you." Marcus smiled coldly. "I know." Her eyes darted around nervously. What brings you here?" Marcus pulled out his phone and pressed play. Stacy's own voice echoed through the restaurant. "People like her don't belong in leadership. They don't have the right mentality. These types of people never actually step up." The entire restaurant went silent. Employees stopped moving. Customers turned their heads. Evelyn's eyes widened. Malik's hands curled into fists. And Stacy? Her face turned ghost white. Marcus tilted his head. Would you care to explain that, Stacy? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Marcus folded his arms. No. Nothing. No excuse. He let the silence stretch, then smiled thinly. You're fired. Gasps rippled through the staff. Stacy choked on her breath. Wait, you can't be serious. I've been here for years. Marcus leaned forward. And in those years, you abused your authority, sabotaged your employees, and actively worked against the values this company was built on. He turned to the other managers. If any of you have similar views, I suggest you walk out that door right now. Silence. Not a single manager moved. Marcus straightened. Good. Then let's make something clear. Urban Fusion is changing, starting today. He turned to Evelyn. Congratulations. You're the new kitchen supervisor. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. Are you serious? Marcus smiled. You earned it years ago. I'm just fixing a mistake. Malik's mouth hung open. Boss, I don't know what to say. Marcus clapped a hand on his shoulder. Say you'll keep holding me accountable. The restaurant erupted into applause. Stacy. She stormed out in silence, her face red with humiliation. And Marcus Carter. He had just taken the first step in rebuilding his company the right way. But he wasn't done yet. The reckoning deepens. The shockwave hits Urban Fusion. The moment Stacy Walters stormed out of the restaurant, the weight of her downfall spread like wildfire through the employees. Gasps, whispers, and stunned expressions filled the air. It wasn't just a dramatic scene. It was a revolution. For years, Stacy had ruled with an iron fist, silencing employees, playing favorites, and promoting discrimination under Marcus's nose. Now, her reign had ended in disgrace. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. He turned back to the assembled staff, his sharp eyes scanning the room. They weren't just employees anymore. They were witnesses. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. And then there were those who looked hopeful. Marcus took a deep breath. Now's the time to make sure this change lasts. He stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. Let me be very clear. This restaurant is changing, and this company is changing. He let the weight of his words sink in. For too long, the people who worked the hardest were ignored, while others were given promotions they didn't deserve. That ends today. Jamal, standing near the grill station, folded his arms. I'll believe it when I see it. Marcus met his gaze without hesitation. You will. Jamal's expression softened, but he didn't say anything. Marcus continued, turning toward Malik, Evelyn, and the other employees who had suffered under Stacy's rule. I'm not just here to talk. I'm here to make real changes. And it starts now. The immediate changes begin. Marcus pulled a stack of documents from his briefcase, employee records, promotion charts, and the detailed notes he had taken while undercover. We're making some staffing changes, he said firmly. 1. Evelyn is now the kitchen supervisor. She had earned it years ago, and Marcus was making sure she got what she deserved. 2. Malik's hours are fully reinstated. No more schedule manipulation. He was back to a full-time position. 3. Pay audits were being conducted. Marcus had discovered significant wage gaps between black and white employees in the same positions. Those discrepancies getting fixed immediately. 4. An anonymous reporting system was being implemented. No one would fear retaliation for speaking up ever again. The staff reacts. The employees exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Finally, Evelyn spoke. I don't know what to say. Marcus smiled. Then don't say anything. Just run this kitchen the way it should have always been run. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded fiercely. Next, Marcus turned to Jamal. Jamal, you said you'd believe it when you see it, so I'll prove it to you, Marcus said. You and I are going to sit down and review this restaurant's policies together. Jamal raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Wait, for real? Marcus nodded. For real. Jamal grinned, shaking his head. All right, boss man. You've got my attention. Malik, meanwhile, just stared in disbelief. I don't even know what to say, man. You don't have to say anything, Malik, Marcus told him. Just show me what you can do with a real chance. Malik gripped his apron tightly, his pride finally restored. The resistance from the remaining managers. Of course, not everyone was happy with the changes. The remaining managers, those who had sided with Stacy, shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Eric, cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, with all due respect, these changes are drastic. Marcus turned to him, his expression unreadable. Drastic? You mean like the way Stacy cut hours whenever she felt like it? Or the way she promoted people based on her own biases instead of merit? Eric looked away, embarrassed. If anyone here has a problem with these changes, Marcus continued, his voice turning icy, you're free to leave. Silence. No one moved. Marcus smirked. That's what I thought. Marcus takes control. By the time the restaurant officially closed for the night, the weight of what had just happened was finally sinking in. This was just the beginning. Marcus had toppled Stacy, but now he had to rebuild everything she had destroyed. The workplace culture had to change. The pay structure had to be fixed. The managers had to be held accountable. But most importantly, the employees needed to believe it. So Marcus did something no CEO had ever done before in Urban Fusion's history. He stayed behind and worked the night shift. Evelyn and Malik stared at him in shock as he grabbed a mop and started cleaning the floors. What are you doing? Evelyn asked. Helping, Marcus said simply. Jamal laughed, shaking his head. Man, I gotta admit, I did not see this coming. Marcus shrugged. Get used to it. Things are different now. And for the first time, in a long time, they believed him. The call that changed everything. Just as Marcus finished up for the night, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered it, stepping into the alley behind the restaurant. Marcus Carter speaking. Mr. Carter, came a sharp, unfamiliar voice. My name is Thomas Greaves. I represent the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We've received interesting reports regarding your company. Can we schedule a meeting? Marcus's stomach dropped. They already know. But instead of fear, a slow smile spread across his face. Absolutely, he said. I'll bring the files myself. The reckoning wasn't over yet. This wasn't just about one restaurant. It was about all of them. And Marcus was about to expose everything. The battle beyond the walls. The call that changed everything. The glow of the streetlights cast long shadows on the alley behind Urban Fusion's flagship location as Marcus Carter gripped his phone. Thomas Greaves, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Marcus had expected to face internal resistance when he started cleaning house, but now, a government agency was involved. We've received interesting reports regarding your company, Graves had said. Can we schedule a meeting? Marcus exhaled slowly, his mind racing. How deep does this go? Had Stacy's corruption spread to other locations? Were other managers running the same discriminatory playbook under the radar? If the EEOC was knocking at his door, it meant he had more to uncover. Marcus's grip on his phone tightened. Absolutely, he said, his voice firm. I'll bring the files myself. It was time to escalate the war. The gathering storm. The next morning, Marcus didn't go to Urban Fusion headquarters. Instead, he drove straight to the flagship restaurant, where his employees had already begun adjusting to their new reality. Inside, the atmosphere was completely different. Malik was smiling as he prepped orders without fear of being yelled at. Evelyn was running the kitchen efficiently, her natural leadership shining through. Jamal. He was watching Marcus carefully, still testing whether all of this was too good to be true. Marcus didn't blame him. Trust wasn't built in a day. As he made his way toward the break room, Evelyn caught his sleeve. "Hey, boss," she said, her voice low. "You should check this out." She handed him a printed email. Marcus scanned the words. Anonymous message. "If you think Stacy was the only one doing this, you're wrong. Check the Urban Fusion locations on the east side. Look at who gets promoted. Look at who gets fired. And if you really want the truth, look at your own corporate team." A slow chill ran down Marcus's spine. He looked up at Evelyn. "Where did you get this?" "Someone left it on my station this morning," she said. No name, no sender. Just this. Marcus's mind was already moving at lightning speed. He had fixed one restaurant, but now he was looking at an entire chain of problems. And if his own corporate team was involved, then he wasn't just dealing with a few bad managers. He was dealing with a system built to keep people like Evelyn, Malik, and Jamal trapped forever. Marcus folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "It's time to go hunting," he muttered. Inside the lion's den. Corporate office showdown. Marcus arrived at Urban Fusion's corporate headquarters that afternoon, stepping through the glass doors with renewed purpose. The executives, men and women who had once admired his vision, now looked nervous as he entered. Marcus didn't schedule a meeting. He walked straight into the boardroom. His executive team was already there, likely whispering about the changes happening at the flagship location. Marcus, James Hollister, the company's COO, stood, forcing a smile. "Good to see you. We were just talking about." Marcus cut him off. How many other locations are running the same toxic system Stacy had? Silence. "Don't play dumb," Marcus continued, slamming a thick folder onto the table. "I have proof of racial discrimination, pay gaps, and fraudulent promotions. And now, the EEOC is investigating us." A few gasps, more shifting in seats. Lisa Tran, the head of HR, spoke next. "Marcus, let's not be hasty. I'm sure there are explanations for." "Explanations?" Marcus's voice was cold. "Go ahead. Explain why a black employee working the same job as a white employee is paid 20% less. Explain why white employees are promoted in half the time. Explain why Stacy and her team got away with this for years." James Hollister's jaw tightened. "Marcus, you have to understand. What I understand is that I trusted this company to uphold my values, and instead, you let it become a machine of discrimination." His voice dropped to a deadly calm. "And I want to know how far this goes." Lisa cleared her throat. "There are factors involved, Marcus. Things aren't so black and white." Marcus stared at her. "That's exactly what they are, Lisa." Silence. "So let's make this simple," Marcus said. "We're running a full-scale audit across all locations, salaries, promotions, firings. If any location is running a system like Stacy's, that manager is gone immediately. If anyone at this table is involved, resign now or be exposed later." A few executives exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "If you think I'm bluffing, just wait until the EEOC investigation starts, because I will burn down this entire company and rebuild it from the ground up if that's what it takes." No one said a word. "Good," Marcus said, grabbing his folder. "Then let's get to work." The truth comes to light. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus led an internal investigation, and what he found sickened him. 17 locations were engaging in systematic discrimination, like Stacy's. Countless employees had been denied fair wages. At least 5 corporate executives had ignored complaints or helped cover up misconduct. It wasn't just bad management. It was a rot that had spread through the entire system. So, Marcus did what no other CEO would dare to do. He cleaned house. Every manager involved in discrimination. Fired. Every wage discrepancy. Corrected and compensated retroactively. A new leadership training program. Launched immediately. A third-party watchdog. brought in to oversee all policies. And most importantly, Marcus personally visited every affected location. He sat with employees, listened to their stories, heard their anger, their exhaustion, their fear. And one by one, he started to rebuild their trust. A new urban fusion. 3 months later, the impact was undeniable. Diversity in leadership had doubled. Employees finally had fair pay and clear paths for promotion. The toxic culture was wiped out at every level. But the most important change. The people who had been ignored finally felt heard. One night, Marcus stopped by the flagship location. Evelyn was running the kitchen like a pro. Malik was thriving. Jamal. He had finally started smiling. "Hey, boss," Jamal called out, grinning. "I gotta admit, I really thought you were full of crap at first." Marcus chuckled. "And now?" Jamal shrugged. "Now, you did what you said you'd do. And that's rare as hell." Marcus smirked, watching as the restaurant buzzed with energy. An energy that had once been tainted by fear and oppression, but was now filled with hope. Urban Fusion wasn't just a restaurant chain anymore. It was a symbol of what was possible when the right people took a stand. And Marcus Carter, he wasn't just the CEO anymore. He was the man who burned down the old world and built something better. The legacy of change. The calm before the storm. The air inside Urban Fusion's flagship location was different. For the first time in years, the employees walked with confidence instead of fear. Malik, once humiliated and overlooked, was now a respected front-end lead. Evelyn, who had been denied promotions for 5 years, now commanded the kitchen with the authority she had always deserved. Jamal, who had never trusted the system, now grinned at Marcus whenever he walked in, a silent nod of approval. Marcus Carter had torn apart the rot that had nearly consumed his company. But deep down, he knew the real battle wasn't over. Because change isn't just about fixing the system. It's about making sure that system never breaks again. And there were still people in power who wanted Urban Fusion to fail. The board's last stand. It didn't take long before the resistance from the top arrived. Marcus sat at the head of a long, polished boardroom table, staring across at Urban Fusion's board of directors. He had expected pushback. But this was an ambush. James Hollister, the former CEO, sat in the middle, his expression as polished as his expensive suit. Lisa Tran, the head of HR, sat beside him, flipping through a thick legal document. And at the end of the table was Daniel Vaughn, a billionaire investor and one of Urban Fusion's most influential backers. Marcus didn't need to read the folder in front of him to know what this was. A coordinated attempt to remove him from his own company. Vaughn leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "Marcus, let's be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You're trying to push me out, Daniel. Because you're making decisions that put this company at risk," Vaughn said smoothly. "You fired dozens of experienced managers. You've overhauled our hiring process. You're bringing in regulators. Marcus, this is corporate suicide." Marcus leaned back, folding his arms. "Corporate suicide? Or are you just mad that I won't let you and your buddies run Urban Fusion like your own personal old boys club anymore?" Hollister's jaw tightened. "Marcus, listen." "No, James." Marcus cut him off coldly. "You listen. I spent weeks working undercover in this company. I saw the abuse firsthand. The discrimination, the systemic bias, the deliberate sabotage of black and immigrant workers." Lisa sighed, flipping a page in the legal document. "And you exposed all of it. But the board is concerned, Marcus. Investors don't like controversy." Marcus laughed bitterly. "They don't like controversy, or they don't like accountability." Silence. Vaughn's smile thinned. "Here's the reality, Marcus. You might be the face of Urban Fusion, but we control the company. If we vote, we can have you removed as CEO today." Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "Go ahead and try." Vaughn raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "Vote me out," Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. Let's see what happens next. Marcus Carter's masterstroke. Vaughn sighed dramatically. Marcus, this is a business, not a crusade. It's both, Marcus corrected. And here's what you don't understand, Daniel. I'm 10 steps ahead of you. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. Then he pressed play. A video began to play on the large TV screen in the boardroom. Footage of Stacy Walters, humiliating Malik. Audio of Eric, the fired manager, joking about certain people not belonging in leadership. Screenshots of internal memos, where managers admitted to cutting hours of workers who spoke up. Vaughn's face darkened. Where did you get this? It's all public now, Marcus said smoothly. Leaked to journalists, labor rights organizations, and social media. By morning, it'll be national news. Lisa paled. You. And let me be very clear, Marcus continued. If the board tries to remove me, I will burn this company to the ground before I let you turn it back into what it was. Silence. The board members exchanged nervous glances. You can fight me, Marcus said, his voice low but deadly serious. Or you can let me do what I was born to do. Turn Urban Fusion into the greatest example of diversity and opportunity in corporate history. Vaughn clenched his fists. And what if we refuse? Marcus smiled. Then I walk out of here, start a new company, and take your best employees with me. And in 5 years, Urban Fusion will be nothing but a footnote in history. Silence. Then, one by one, the board members started nodding. We let him stay, Lisa said finally. And we move forward. Vaughn looked furious, but he said nothing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, victorious. Smart decision. The final victory. Over the next 6 months, Marcus transformed Urban Fusion at every level. Employee wages increased, making sure no one was underpaid. More leadership positions were filled by underrepresented employees, including Evelyn's promotion to regional director. Anti-discrimination policies became company law, enforced by an independent oversight team. The toxic corporate culture was shattered, replaced with true equality. Marcus had not just won a battle, he had won the war. One last visit. One night, Marcus returned to the flagship location. As soon as he walked in, Malik, Evelyn, and Jamal greeted him with wide smiles. Boss, Jamal called. Thought you forgot about us. Marcus chuckled. Never. Evelyn crossed her arms, smirking. So what now? Marcus looked around. The restaurant was alive. Employees were laughing. The energy was vibrant. Now, Marcus exhaled. Now we make sure this lasts. We make sure no one, no investor, no CEO, no corrupt manager ever breaks what we built. Malik grinned. You really think we can change the whole industry? Marcus smiled, looking around at his people, his real people, the ones who had built Urban Fusion from the ground up. We already did. And this was only the beginning.